Let's start with canvas size. I always use 3000 by 3000. Ibispaint offers default sizes like postcard, A4, A5, you name it. Just make sure it's at least 1000 by 1000 so your drawing isn't pixelated. I love using 3000 by 3000 because it stays sharp even when I zoomed in. Next is, of course, the references. I usually use Pinterest or Xiaohongshu, and I usually go for models or K-pop idols photo shoots, like for today's video. This is a picture of Mingyu from 17. That face and that body and that hair, like, come on, hippies! The brevity aside, focus on references with clear lighting and shadows. You should be able to make out the shapes of the shadows in a good reference. Aside from photo references, I also use some art style references from my favorite artists. Since learning about Xiaohongshu and Chinese artists, lately I've been improving my art style. My favorites are Junyuan and Black Sister. I like the semi-realistic manhwa style of Junyuan, and I like the bold brush strokes Black Sister does. So whether you're finding an art style or improving your current one, I really recommend having art style references. I always start with a silhouette. This helps me in visualizing the big picture of the illustration. I'm using flat watercolor opaque brush for everything. Silhouettes, sketching, rendering. It has faded tips, which you can use for blending and creating midtones. I don't even have to use smudge whenever I'm painting, thanks to this brush. I don't like using multiple brushes. I want it easy and simple, like my noodle. The only other brush I use is the airbrush, and these brushes are already available on Ibispaint's brush library. For the rough sketch, I start with a circle and a cross, and sketch the face really simply. As long as you can tell which one is the eyes and which one is the nose, you're golden. You can also trace the guidelines from the references for easier sketching, but try practicing not to. Here's the rule of thumb of face anatomy. You slice the face in half and you have the eyes, slice it in half again and you have the nose, slice it in half again and you have the mouth. The distance between two eyes are one eye apart, and the inner corner should be in one line. The width of the nose is roughly one eye apart as well, while the mouth is slightly wider. Again, this is just a rule of thumb, it's not a law. By the way, I'm drawing Eva once again because he's my favorite doctor whose name sounds like Wall-E's robot girlfriend. I originally wanted to draw him wearing his cowboy hat, but somehow it looked too Willy Wonka when I drew it, so I decided to let it hang behind his neck instead. Now we create a new layer to draw a cleaner sketch. This is where I apply my art style and use style references to simplify the facial features. Remember that you don't need to draw exactly like your photo reference. That's the beauty of semi-realism. You mix realism with manhwa, anime, cartoon. You can simplify and exaggerate the anatomy, and that is what we call stylization. Pardon my French, it's really bad. Keep your clean sketch simple, because too many lines can be overwhelming in the shading and rendering stage. My sketch looks more anime than semi-realistic because I simplified the facial features. By the way, this is how I simplify the face. For the eyes, I made it more angular. As for the nose, I focus on drawing the nostrils, nose bridge, and the darkest shadow on the side. As for the mouth, I did not sketch the upper lip and only draw the line and lower lip. I don't know what Eva's hair looked like without the hat, so I'm just using my imagination. Hopefully he doesn't have antennas like most Genshin characters do, although it would be very cute if he had one like his bird companion. Afterward, I'm drawing the body following the reference. I will be focusing more on the face for today, but I have a video dedicated to drawing body and muscle, so you can check that out after this. Don't forget to flip your canvas from time to time to check the symmetry. It doesn't have to be 100% symmetrical. As long as it doesn't look weird and wonky when you flip it, you're good to go. Now we're adding the base color. I'm just using the paint bucket tool and a solid brush for this. Flat watercolor opaque is a great brush, but it's not 100% solid, so I use another brush for the base color. Eva has white hair. but avoid using pure white as the base because it's too bright. I use light gray with a hint of blue-green instead. I always use muted colors first because they're easier to adjust later on. Also, painting with vibrant colors from the get-go hurts my fragile 84-year-old eyes. You can also use grayscale, which is great for value study and will improve your rendering. Next, I merge all the base colors, created a multiply layer on top of it, and then use airbrush to apply the soft shadows. Soft shadows are important to add volume and realism to your painting. For the color, I took the skin color, opened the color wheel, moved the slider slightly to the right, and picked the color around here. Take care not to use too dark of a color because multiply will make it darker and more saturated. Afterwards, I add another multiply layer for hard shadows using a high opacity brush. I block in large and dark areas, and it's kind of like cell shading. No need to be perfect or too tidy, just focus on mapping out the big shadows. Then I add lighter shadows or midtones to add dimension. Midtones are really important in painting semi-realism. I've talked about it multiple times in my previous videos, but I will talk more about it briefly in a minute. Now we start rendering or painting over the sketch. I always merge all the layers and render using only one layer, but you can render in separate layers to play it safe. I start by adding darker shadows, especially under the neck and along the side of the face. Since I use dark red when sketching, I just use that for the shadows by applying it gradually so it looks natural. Mingyu has a dark shadow on this side of his face. It can be intimidating to add that dark of a shadow in a painting, so here's how I paint it. Blend the dark shadow downwards with low opacity brush. Leave this area alone for reflective light. Swipe lighter color on top of the dark shadow, take the resulting color, and this is what we call the midtones. Using that color and still with a low opacity brush, blend it to the rest of the face. Make sure to use big brush for easier blending. Why do I do all this? To add volume, of course. You don't want a flat looking cheek. You want them plump, like a plum. Here's how I simplify the shadows for the facial features. For eyes, add shadows to the corners and keep the center lighter. This is following the eye socket on the skull. Aegyosal depends on the light source. Sometimes the corners are darker, sometimes they're lighter, so consult your references. For noses, start with applying the darker shadow. There's also shadow below the nose, but right under the nostrils tend to be lighter. Don't forget to apply midtones on the side of the nose that's closer to the light source. Then I merge all the layers to paint over the sketch. For eyes, I don't do much changes. But for the nose, I'm adding shadows around the skin of the nostrils and blend the midtones with the rest of the skin. I also add the philtrum to add realism, but this is optional. If it looks weird when you add it in, you can always leave it out. This is semi-realism, not hyper-realistic. For the lips, I usually just add shadow near the line and then blur out the upper lip line. Now I will continue painting the body. Yes, even though the face is not finished, we should not hyper-focus on one area, but work on the painting as a whole. I tend to forget this, so do as I say, not as I do. Also, by working on other areas, you can come back to the face with fresh eyes and can notice your mistakes easier. One thing I learned from Black Sister's work is understanding wraps. Not this wrap. Are you guys hungry? Okay, for example, imagine a cloth wrapped around a cylinder. The shadows of the cloth would follow the shape of the cylinder. But imagine there's a piece of jello stuck to the cylinder. The cloth would change shape around it. Are you with me so far? Fong, where are you going with this? Okay, look, what I'm trying to say is the cylinder is like our skeleton. The jello is the muscle and the cloth is our skin. You have to imagine how the skin wrapped around the muscle and the skeleton when rendering. Take Eva's chest, for example. He has big pectoral muscles, I hope, fingers crossed. So the skin would be wrapped like this around his muscles. With the current lighting, the shadow would look something like this, and the shadow on his tank top would follow his chest. This also applies to his arms, his neck, forearms, face, everywhere except for the hair. There, That's what I meant. Probably should have just used Eva's boobies from the start and skipped the whole cylinder jello metaphor. Anyway, let's continue with hair. Painting white hair is tricky because it's not really white. But if you add in too much shading, it can look too dark. I look for additional references from other artists to help simplify the shadows. I always make Hyundai logo shapes or like a tilted U shapes. I focus on the big shapes first, and if the details are lost in the rendering, I redraw it in a new layer. I still struggle with painting hair. I used to paint it easily, but after knowing Xiaohongshu and also wanting to improve my own style, I have a different method and I'm still working on perfecting that. I will move on to the eyes because it will be covered by his bangs. If you're working on one layer like me, always draw from the bottom to the top. First, I paint the tear duct over the lower lash line. Drawing it across the lash line instead of just the inner corner prevents the eyes from looking too long. Next, I'm coloring the iris with muted colors. I know Genshin characters have vibrant and very detailed eyes, and Eva is no exception, but I will add all the details later so the eyes don't look out of place. I draw thick upper lash lines for that anime/manhwa look. I usually draw 2 lines, then fill in the color in the middle. I only add long lashes at the outer corner and follow the direction of the upper lid. I don't like drawing individual lashes. To emphasize the eyelids, I darken the corners and highlight the center. I also add highlights to the lash lines and aegyosal for a stylized effect. There's actually more stylization I did for the eyes, but I will add that in later along with Eva's scar and neck tattoo. Now that the eyes are 80% done, we can continue with the hair. Honestly, I cannot really explain how I paint the hair because at this point I'm just winging it. Sorry about that. One thing I realized, you just kinda have to draw fast and not overthink it when it comes to hair to avoid hyper-focusing on every single strand. I came to this realization after some advice from my lovely viewers on my streams. So big thanks to you guys. Have a cookie. The color is a bit too dark for white hair, but instead of changing the color, I'm adding highlights with very light gray. Not pure white because it would look unnatural. I'm also adding a bit of the skin color to the lower part of the hair using overlay layer. I also added some teal so it looks more like Eva's hair. Before adding more deets, I'm working on the head and accessories while my pea brain still remembers they exist. Next, I add highlights on the face. Do not overdo the highlights. I know it's very satisfying, but control yourself. Add it gradually so the face doesn't look like it's dipped in olive oil. I also add line art to the painting to make it more defined, because some details are lost during the rendering. For the eyes, I'm following Eva's eye design. However, since this is semi-realism, I had to omit some design and make the eyes a bit darker so it looks more natural. I like to add lash shadows on the aegyosal to stylize the eyes even more. I do this in another layer so I can easily fix it. If it looks a bit out of place, it's fine. It is called stylization. Pardon me. In case you don't know this, I finally subscribed to Ibispaint. Yes, sadly I am graduating from the F2P users. But now I can try the tone curve, which is not that different from Procreate's, and also gradient map. To use gradient map, you should duplicate your drawing because you cannot adjust the opacity from filter. Then turn the blending mode to soft light and lower the opacity. You can use multiple gradient maps to adjust the color. Just remember to always duplicate the original drawing. I think this color looks kinda cute. Kinda have like a soft pink hue to it. Anyway, hope you enjoyed the video. Leave a like if you do. Okay, thanks, bye!